January after seems like a great time to get started. So hello, everybody. Welcome in and welcome back. I'm Tiffany MacLennan. I am so excited to be here again with you on this Friday for Focus Friday. If you've been here before, you know the spiel, but if you're new, this is a space to try to get us together to talk about some of the most pressing challenges in the sector right now in a way that, brings together some guided discussion, but as well as some open opportunity to kind of ask our questions, hang out, meet new people, have coffee, spend Friday afternoons together. About last week, 2 weeks ago now, this is a bi-weekly session. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about international student enrollment and what the trends in international enrollment look like right now and what we anticipate they will look like in the future. If you missed that episode, it is still available on YouTube, but also you got the summary this morning in your inbox in the Focus Friday email. Today, we're focused on something that is just as important, a little more quick. This Tuesday, as you all know, the federal budget was released. And I think there was a pretty interesting mix of continuity and change that happened in that. On one hand, there was a lot of great things and information on things like productivity and innovation and housing and building. On the flip side, I think there were some places that also we kind of didn't see some of the investments where we would have expected, and things like training, sustained research funding, or even coherent strategies for post-secondary education. Going to dive into that today with all of you, and I couldn't be more excited than to have our three panelists with us today, who come with vast expertise and excitement to talk to you all. So first we have James Hammond, Director of Public Affairs from the U15, representing the country's research-intensive universities. Michael McDonald's the Vice President, External and Member Relations at Colleges and Institute Canada, the national voice for colleges, institutes, CEGEPs, and CEGEPs. And then we have Michelle Coates-Mather, the Vice President of Public Affairs at Universities Canada, and the organization representing the broader university community nationwide. Together, we're going to talk a little bit about what the federal budget signals today and kind of what it will mean for us as a sector moving forward. So if we're all okay, we're going to jump right in with questions. Are the three of you ready? Yeah, amazing. The first one's to all of you, and I'm going to go James, Michael, Michelle. We're going to start broad. What stood out for you in this year's federal budget, either in what it did include or what it didn't include? James.
Thanks, Tiffany. Three things for me, just in the language that really stood out. One was really strong language on the foundational importance of research and innovation to the Canadian economy. Research really ran through this whole budget and was connected to a lot of the initiatives that were in there. Secondly, it was really great to see a strong recognition of the contribution of Canada's leading research universities to securing talent, to attracting talent, the role of that talent pipeline, and the importance of bringing in highly qualified people to Canada's future. And then thirdly, and we'll speak more to this, I think, later in the conversation, but a really clear response that was in there to some of the calls that from the research community about securing the investments, the continuity of Budget 2024. That was really good to see strong language in the budget on that piece as well.
Michael, how about you?
So I think that in this budget, and again, we'll unpack it a little bit more, I know, in some of our conversations around place-based initiatives, but we do feel, and I think we're a bit more lukewarm. I think there's some really positive stuff that we were able to see in there. And the fact that there is, and I think a kudos to those in system who advocated kind of actively for it, that post-secondary infrastructure is now a federal thing again, at least via some pipeline, is quite the realization, especially over since the post-secondary student infrastructure fund was last about a decade ago. So that kind of achievement, I think, recognize some of the core community-based pieces that institutions can play, especially part of that community development fund. But I think that place-based conversation about how we are ensuring the prosperity is something that is equally accessible across the country remains a challenge. And I think from a college side, like we would say that was a real missing the mark on being able to extend the research in, again, essentially cutting college-based research, especially that community-based oriented thing that helps out SMEs, was a real place of challenge. And we do think the conversation of we have a lot of infrastructure we plan on building, but how are we going to build this and who is going to build this remains a real prominent and open question. And one that we're interested in continuing with this government, since we train about 70% of the people who are entering into the trades. And I think we feel that there's a more opportunity for engagement on that.
Michelle.
Well, I mean, so now I'm trying to think of something different from what my two colleagues have just said. So, look, I think our take at Universities Canada largely is I think overall there's this sense that universities are a part of the agenda. So I think there's like a good news story there for our membership writ large. I do want to touch on Michael's piece though around the core infrastructure funding piece because I was going to raise it. That is actually a hugely significant win. I cannot underscore that enough. We're going to talk a lot about research here today and talent and all that great stuff as we should, but that subplot, I don't want it to go missing in action because it did require a very proactive advocacy push on behalf of Universities Canada and others over the last many months to make sure that we are, for the first time, universities and colleges an eligible category in infrastructure. So yeah, I think that's a really great subheadline that I don't want us to lose sight of in this conversation. So Michael, thanks for raising that.
I'm sure we'll come back to it and answer more questions on it as we go through. James, I do want to start with you because I think the U15 in particular did pretty good in this budget, in my opinion. So I want to talk to you about the talent side. The budget had a lot of emphasis on attracting global talent, which does clearly benefit research-intensive universities. But much of kind of direct support for things like building up emerging talent was kind of hit or miss. I would be curious, what do you think this balance signals about how Ottawa currently views the research ecosystem overall?
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. I mean, as I said off the top, I think this focus on the importance of developing talent that was there in the budget, the importance of Canada being able to compete for talent internationally is really, really crucial. And it was great to see that was sort of center in the thinking from the government in this budget. It's going to be how we're going to build our own sovereign capabilities to make Canada stronger in the future. Investing in talent we know is the foundation for prosperity, for resilience, for security. So it was really great to see that in there. On your question, like firstly, I think it is important to note that the investments in talent in this budget directly build on what was in budget 2024. And we know there was a focus on boosting graduate scholarships, on postdoctoral fellowships, the significant increases that were there to core grants for fundamental research, a lot of which flows to early career researchers. So we do sort of see what was in this budget sort of anchored in those kind of earlier initiatives in budget 2024. And also, we do see, yes, there was a focus on senior research chairs and a really welcome effort to try and compete internationally for some of the best minds out there. But we did see as well continued support for that whole talent continuum. And we were certainly clear to government that was really important. There was $120 million in there to boost funding for top doctoral students and postdoctoral fellows. We had money, $120 million in there to recruit assistant professors, as well as that research chairs initiative. So I think it is great to see that there is support for the entire continuum of that talent pipeline. And look, in this moment, we know that Canada's economy is going to have to undergo a real profound transformation, frankly, in the face of sort of all that's going on in the world, this urgent need to secure our own future. And we're really pleased to see a budget that signals that we can be a global destination for research excellence. That's really, really welcome, and it positions Canada well to compete internationally across the entirety of that talent continuum, from those senior chairs you were mentioning all the way through.
Yeah, absolutely. And, really closely linked to your answer, do you see any risk at all that Canada's research model is leaning more towards importing developed talent as opposed to kind of developing domestic talent?
Yeah, that's a really important question because, of course, we want to ensure that there's continued opportunities for the best and brightest in Canada and from around the world to succeed in Canada's research system and at Canada's research universities. I mean, talent development happens along that continuum, right? And attracting top talent at senior levels helps create a really vibrant research ecosystem that's going to benefit grad students, early career researchers in labs, give more opportunities, more hands-on research experience to Canadians. So we're really keen not to see that as a competition, but a sort of complementary. And yeah, this absolutely should not just be seen as an opportunity to attract international talent, but also to encourage Canadians we've lost over many years to brain drain in the South and elsewhere, return to Canada, open up more opportunities for researchers that are already here. All of this, as I said, is about that talent continuum. So we'll see how these mechanisms are designed and implemented over the coming weeks and months. But I think you're absolutely right to stress that importance of opportunities for Canadians here too.
I am going to stick with you, James. I'm sorry to keep you on the hot seat for so
Sure.
long all at once. But last year, like you mentioned, there was a pretty decent investment in Tri-Council funding. And this year did seem to hold on to that. I think a handful of us were really concerned on if that was going to stay or not. And then on top of that, the Tri-Councils, we're expecting pretty much a 15% reduction across every single government body, but the Tri-Councils got about 2%, which gestures towards that there's some pretty good faith in the research capacity in our universities overall. At the same time, most new money that has come in has gone into things like dual use technology for defense, AI, instead of kind of the general institution research funding that we all know and have become accustomed to. I'd be curious what your take on kind of that mix of new investment versus lack of cutting, if I will.
Yeah. Well, I think firstly on your first bit around the treatment of the council funding, I think in the current fiscal context, the recognition in this budget of the importance of support for research provided through the tri-councils is really significant, and the language around their contributions to the government's wider agenda. But yeah, the special treatment that they received in the context of a difficult expenditure review, protecting the investments of budget 2024, which are forecast to grow significantly over the next few years, was really, really significant, I think, for the research community, and really sort of reflected some of those calls. I think it was in part a direct response to the efforts from many across the academic ecosystem. There was an open letter issued by the Coalition for Canadian Research. There was a lot of researchers and a lot of academics, you're right, had anxiety and expressed the importance of this. So we were really sort of pleased to see that recognized. It was certainly a message we were communicating to government at U15. So that backing for fundamental research that was there in budget 2024 that's existed for many years, I think that really helps Canada be sort of in a position to be more strategic, to be more targeted, ensure that we're sort of securing our own sovereign capabilities, our own technological independence in some of those advanced fields like artificial intelligence that you were mentioning. That this is key to our security and our economic future, right? Is ensuring that we have that base of fundamental research. And I think the next step is getting some of those mechanisms, that architecture right for some of this more mission-oriented and strategic efforts to work right. We noted that in the budget there's an articulation, a commitment from the government towards continuing on with the proposed capstone research organization. We're going to be watching that closely. I think getting that architecture right to build on that base is going to be really key if we want to achieve some of those strategic outcomes that the budget mentioned and that you brought up in some of those key fields for our future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Michael, I'm going to switch to you on the college side. I don't know about most of the folks in this room, but my favorite part of budget night is reading everyone's responses to the budget, which probably makes me a little bit weird, but also probably the reason that I'm hosting this thing. So things work out in different ways. CICAN's statement called for a place-based approach to national policy. Can you unpack what that actually means in practice and kind of how you see colleges operationalizing that vision after the budget?
Yeah, so first off, thanks for reading it. And second off, I was going to say, I think in what we are responding to in here, and I want to talk this both the politics and say the public policy elements of this. What we are talking about, and an element of this, that we do think that this budget missed the mark on, was calling into, and we call somewhat into question, is how we're going to ensure that the prosperity that we are trying to build is something that is accessible across the country, and that the nature of both Canadian, whether it be Canadian firms or whether it be Canadian workers and their communities, are able to see themselves within a rapidly changing economy. And the expectations in those regions. And it's funny, like we have pretty much a strategy that's based on building a lot of new things in rural environments to be able to extract new opportunities for us to build what I guess is prosperity and revenue. And then we have a lot of investments that are not directed towards necessarily what's going to be the things that drive their needs. And we think that's part of the research continuum. We think that's part of the workforce continuum. We think that's part of some of the conversations on national infrastructure. I think that place-based element is necessary for the legitimacy of these systems and the public policy, because Canadians need to be able to see some of these benefits, and I was going to say these investments close to them. And that means the conversations about how are we ensuring that we have a workforce that's able to sustain these kind of products and sustain these communities, especially in challenges where they may be dealing with demographic issues. It's a conversation about what the research system is able to do. And we do think as a part, and again, a place where we highlight a challenge with this budget is that the way that colleges do research and really channeled through the College and Community Innovation Program, which is that very much a local, very often SME tied, and very often dealing with their direct problems, is something that anchors a legitimacy of a research system. And we think that, in fact, like our system is being cut at the end of the day. And I take part responsibility of that. Part of my job is to be a good government relations person. We did not receive those investments. But I do target that raises the question about when you're talking about somebody in Sault Ste. Marie, or if you're talking about people out in rural Saskatchewan, about how they see and experience this, and how we ensure that the things that this government's identified as rapidly changing sectors, AI, are areas that are being able to integrate it into their daily practice and supported. And we think the college system, because of its proximity, its closeness, and its focus on that business impact, especially with many SMEs, but also in the larger enterprise, is just an important area of focus, and one we hope to see more focus on from this government.
Yeah, absolutely. I am coming to you all live right now from the Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario conference, reimagined, play on words. You can figure out how to say it. I haven't heard anybody say it out loud yet. And I just actually was walking out of a session on kind of that place-based college connection, and they were talking about Lambton and Sarnia and kind of what that will look like over the next handful of years for them. So definitely a big topic. One thing that you did touch on that I kind of want to go back to is that, you know, a lot of the budget this time around leaned really heavily on building housing, building infrastructure, building our economic capacity overall as a country. But when it came to building the workforce to do it, you know, there wasn't a lot of money there for new apprenticeships, trades, skills. What's the impact of that gap for colleges and the broader system trying to deliver on these national goals?
Well, I think it's one of those areas where you're starting to see this play out in the national labor force data. I mean, the LMIC, the Labor Market Information Council's most recent reports indicating of where you're seeing persistent lower unemployment is with a lot of those college-educated fields. And that we are just in a situation where we are not able to produce enough. We are seeing significant retirements on the skilled trades front, and we're seeing significant labor shortages in a variety of different areas that surround that, technician fields, a variety of the pieces that are so essential, especially national infrastructure projects, that will be core to being able to achieve them on time and on budget. To be able to do that, even the buildings that, again, for post-secondary, it's like, that we all want to build tie into this labor supply. Like, we will need these folks to be able to be there and to fill that. Well, there were the investments in the union training, so the UTI did receive some, and colleges are accessible to some of the elements of that. This wasn't in the scale necessary to deal with the fact that we're dealing with hundreds of thousands of shortages in the country across the board. And we're also dealing with the fact that just as we treat like the high-end researchers as things that are expensive for institutions to be able to support, that need significant wraparound programs, we seemingly don't recognize that actually welding is quite expensive to be able to deliver. Putting a welding bench, putting the staff, putting the equipment around that has always been something that's cost intensive and something that needs to be recognized if we want to be able to support the workforce to be able to accomplish some of those objectives, and especially make sure that we also have that place-based element that regionally we're able to do this across the country.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Michelle, I'm going to turn to you now. Universities Canada release emphasized a lot of partnership. And I thought that was lovely. Partnership with industry, partnership with government, partnership with communities on research, housing, talent. Of those three areas, where do you see the greatest potential right now based off of this budget for universities to make an impact?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, they all matter, and I'm going to sort of pick up again a little bit on where Michael was going here on the talent piece, because I think that is really the flow through here, and where candidly the entire sector has an opportunity. When I say that, I mean, you know, industry, government, the higher education sector. We need some coordination around this, and we've been advocating for that now for many months, really since the Prime Minister Carney came to power, about thinking about these things really holistically. But I think that's a huge opportunity for universities in particular. particular. And when I say talent, I truly mean the full spectrum of talent, from the research talent we already have here in Canada that are doing incredible work, right? Our graduate students and our postdocs, who are really the backbone of university-led research and development. And then, of course, I'm talking about, the students that are learning and training to become teachers and nurses and doctors and engineers and quantum physicists, all of these really important careers that are fundamental, I think, to our workforce, both today, but to one that's going to shift and adapt as, AI becomes an increasing tool that we're all going to have to learn to live, work, and play with. So I think ensuring that we have that right mix of skills, and I think this is where I'm sort of picking up a little bit on Michael's thread, is really critically important. So what are the skills and the talent that we need, and how do we ensure that we're developing those skills and talent in a way that is agile, right? Because we only know what we know today. We can't predict the future. So there's, I think, a lot to be said about making sure that universities are thinking through how we're adapting our approaches to programming. And I can tell you, we had our member meeting last week, and that was a big part of our discussion. There is no doubt that there are universities in every region across this country that are thinking really practically about this question, and how they're thinking through their programs and stackable degrees and micro-credentials and work integrated learning, and bringing in more of those opportunities, especially for folks that are, maybe coming back to do some reskilling as they're looking at a potential new career opportunity, later in their life or what have you. So having sort of this talent and workforce strategy piece, to me, is the piece that we've got to keep our eye on now moving forward. I do think, we've got some huge potential with Minister Hajdu's portfolio to maybe see some movement there. That's something I'll be watching for as we head into the budget 2026 cycle, which, let's face it, we're already in. So that, I think, is something we have to really continue to think about, how we're going to connect the dots between, apprenticeships and colleges and university talent, because, you can't build a bridge without an architect or the welder. So really, this is a huge opportunity, and there's a significant opportunity for universities, I think, to really elevate the role that we are playing in making sure that we're educating, important segments of talent, so that we can, address all of these concerns. But I think the last point on this that I'll make, it's so critically important that we all agree and understand that that is not a solution that higher education or government can solve alone. Industry, private sector absolutely have to be a part of that discussion, because certainly, it's not up to universities or colleges, for that matter, to fix the unemployment gap, right? So, so I think that this is a huge opportunity, and something that we should all care about, I think, equally.
Absolutely. I want to stick in with something that you just said, but kind of a different angle on it. This budget put a lot of spotlight emphasis on research with kind of national applications, and working with ISET and NSERC and NRC and ESDC, and just, the slew, if you will. But a lot of that has raised a lot of interesting questions about the role of universities in things like dual use technology and AI creation, adoption, integration, AI sovereignty, and so more. The biggest question that I've gotten from people coming into this session was, what does that mean for research in universities? How do we navigate the line between, funding advancing national priorities, and then while also maintaining a lot of the openness, the academic freedom, and global collaboration that we're really quite used to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And the short answer to that is having a seat at the table, right? Like, that's how you influence the thinking and the enabling policies that are being developed. So, like, let's start with the big picture here. And this has already been discussed, of course, in this conversation, but we know Budget 2024 made some major new commitments that we hadn't seen for science and research in many, many years. In a lot of ways, this budget, as was already mentioned by James, builds on a lot of that, I think, important work, which is a good thing. It is a good signal. So I don't want us to lose sight of that, because I do think it's important for us to remind ourselves, especially in the current context of the economy and everything that we're dealing with, this is, I think, really critically important that research continues to be on the agenda. So what this tells me, I think, is this government sees research talent as a strategic national asset, right? And that universities are really central to solving some of Canada's biggest challenges. So to your question, though, how do universities navigate that line between advancing those national priorities, protecting openness, all of these things, but also integrity of research. That really comes back down to our principles and our values, right? So how universities have always been able to balance curiosity with contributing to national goals and upholding those sort of standards of academic freedom. So that is ultimately what makes the discovery process possible, and why Canada has, I think, a pretty strong reputation as a trusted partner when it comes to research. Certainly, Universities Canada and many of our members are already actively engaged with our government colleagues, tri-councils, and others that are designing the policies around all of these new initiatives. That's also the case around the new defense industrial strategy and Borealis. Sorry, my home phone is now calling. But look, I think our focus then goes back to what I said at the top, just making sure that we're continuing to engage with the people that actually have influence over these new programs and initiatives, and informing those policies in a thoughtful way, in a way that ensures that we are still empowering our researchers, right? We're not constraining them, but recognizing, of course, that we are in a space where we're going to see, I think, a bit more mission-driven research, because this is the time that we're living in right now. But I do think it's again just really worth recognizing. Overall, I do think we have some wins on the research side, in this budget. So now it's just a matter of keeping the momentum on that going.
Absolutely. I want to take us back up to kind of the forest view. For each of you, what do you think this budget tells us about kind of where federal policy on higher education is heading over the next few years? James, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Tiffany. I think step one is listen to what the Prime Minister has been saying in recent weeks. If we go back and listen to his recent speech at the University of Ottawa, he really signaled, right, that Canada is known for its world-class universities, strong scientific excellence, commitment to academic freedom. I think that was a real sort of vision for what we can expect to see over the next few years. Specifically, this budget, I think it signals that research universities, a vibrant research ecosystem can be a real source of strength that Canada, that the government can build on in a whole host of other key areas, that it's really connected to the government's wider agenda. We know by developing talent, by driving new innovations, we can be a foundation of strength for the Canadian economy, for Canadian society in this moment when there's real questions around sovereignty and economic growth and new opportunities. So I think the signal that is there that now is a moment to build on those strengths, as Michelle was just saying, see the higher education system recover, hopefully, from a period of some turbulence. And how we need to ask ourselves, I think, how can we contribute to this national mission to build sovereignty, Canadian strength in this moment? I think specifically when we look at the early indications that were in the budget around the defense industrial strategy, we see that. And Canada's leading research universities really are going to try and position ourselves to be working productively with government on these initiatives in ways they're going to promote Canadian sovereignty, Canadian security, and really tie ourselves in, as I said, to this wider mission that the government's articulated over the next few years.
Michael, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think the one elephant in the room that we haven't talked a lot about was on the international student and the levels plan, which was also dropped at the same time. And I do think it's obviously, like, I don't think we can have a conversation about the longer impacts on the post-secondary education system in the country without highlighting here. And again, just for the Coles notes for everybody, the levels plan did cut the numbers of projected international or targeted international students roughly by half. For the next coming 3 years as an idea for what now is this more of a recognition of what current policy has already been leading to? I think is a fair point on here. But I do want to highlight that this still means that the general trend in the country, and one of the main focus points would be how, and the main questions that will be presented to provincial governments, how are we going to actually fund the operations of these institutions? Because at the end of the day, be it any of the institutions, be it universities, be it research-intensive universities, the fundamental core question continues to remain what is the financial viability of the model given a fixed tuition situation in almost every single province and diminishing provincial contributions. And those elements weren't addressed. Like, that still kicks that can down the road in a really clear way that continues, I think, to put stress on what these systems are going to be able to support and accomplish. Like, at their core fundamentals, like, we can talk about all the things we want to build on top of this structure, but there is an operating fund challenge that remains unaddressed, and this budget didn't confront that question at all. Now, federal government can say, hey, that's a provincial issue, have fun, folks. But if they're expecting the outcomes from anything from James's excellent interventions, Michelle's or mine, like, there's going to have to be that conversation, and it's one that is becoming increasingly clear will need to be that answered at a different level, because on what had been, again, a conversation on the international student is quite clear where this direction is going and what we will be in for the foreseeable future on this point. So I think that has to remain a central discussion point. And I think that when, as the system as a whole, post-secondary thinks about itself, remains the unanswered question that we are going to continue to have to go to work with our provincial associations, work with provincial governments, but work with the federal government also to understand, because this is a shared responsibility and a shared ability to achieve objectives that is about that national priority, and that needs a shared collaboration. Again, you'll hear me harp on federalism, but I'm not going to do it for more than a few seconds.
My favorite question to ask my boss, Alex Usher, is, so Alex, what do you think? Do you think a Minister of Higher Education federally would fix all these problems? And well, I'm shocked some days that I continue to be employed after I ask that question. Michelle, what are your thoughts?
Oh boy. I mean, where to start? I mean, look, I think Michael does raise it like an important point. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't just sort of acknowledge that, even my earlier point about a workforce strategy. I mean, we can't do that without also thinking through immigration policy, right? So the two very much are codependent. But look, again, I say that also mindful, yes, we do live in a country where education is very much a provincial responsibility, but there's absolutely truth to the fact that we need to be thinking about that thing thinking through that particular piece of the puzzle in a coordinated way between federal and provincial governments. With that said, though, I think a few things for me, look, that I've already touched on. I think how I would sum all of this up is, the doubling down on talent and research, the focus on scholarships, attracting global talent, grad students, but while also ensuring that we're still making the investments we need to support the talent we have on the ground, remains a huge, opportunity. I think the push to connect what happens on university campus to the real world is also going to be important. So whether it's skills for the workforce, like we discussed, partnerships with industry, research that's advancing sovereignty, security, climate change, all of these important things are pieces that we're going to have to keep our eye on the prize there too. And then third, another important context piece is money is tight. It is tight everywhere, federally, provincially, municipally. So I do think instead of broad new funding, I think we should be preparing ourselves for what we might see as more targeted investments in certain areas. And I think in that regard, again, I'm mindful that universities in particular, I think, did pretty well in this budget when it comes to that space and a recognition that we obviously are seen as economic drivers. So I'm just, perhaps I'm too much of an optimist, but I do want to just be mindful of that here. And I think ultimately where we want to get to is a place, like I said earlier, about how we're coordinating right across the board on these things to really make sure that higher education is really, at the end of the day, helping to improve the lives of every Canadian.
I do have one last quick question for the panelists, but as a reminder, the second half of these sessions is dedicated for you to ask your questions. So I'm going to go through one last question with these three, and then if you have a question that you would like to ask, I thoroughly encourage you to raise your hand. We will unmute you. You can ask your question. Someone here will address it, or we'll all try, or you can put it in the chat and I'll make sure to read it out loud. But as people prep their questions, because I know someone is burning with one, budgets come and go every year. Budget 2026 started on Tuesday at about 4:10 p.m. But what from this budget will you be watching over the next year to see if these investments really kind of made an impact? James, I'm going to start with you again.
Sure. Thanks, Tiffany. I mean, I think for us, top of mind looking at that budget is the success of the talent attraction initiative. I know that our research universities are ready to move really quickly and seize this moment to build on some of those strengths that we were just talking about. Canada's reputation for scientific excellence, for academic freedom. I think there's a real opportunity there that we want to seize. But to touch on what Michael was just raising, I think a lot of this is dependent on addressing some of those barriers in Canada's immigration system. And so how these budget initiatives play into that, I think that is something we will be closely watching, especially, of course, the impact with the recent caps on study permits. We want to focus on rebuilding Canada's immigration system in a sustainable manner with a focus on attracting the best and brightest that we're going to need for the future. We've heard that really nicely articulated in mandate letters from the Prime Minister. So we're going to be watching to see how these budget measures play into that. I think the recent announcement from IRCC that graduate students will be removed from the study permit cap is a really great start. It sends that clear signal. It's an opportunity, frankly, for Canada to sort of rebuild its reputation, to reinforce our position globally as a center for research excellence. And we really want to try and achieve that with these budget measures. But we do need to send that message back to the world. We need to send a message to the best minds out there that we are welcome, that we're welcome to host them, that they are welcome to come. We're ready to have them. You're welcome here to study, to advance your research. And so I think that part will be really key to sort of how we track the success of this budget over the next few years.
Michael.
Yeah, I'm going to take a political angle on this one. Guys, this was the first budget for a new government, and it is its statement budget and its legacy. It is going to be judged in communities across the country in the years to come about the impact of these investments, which have the longest runway before whenever that next time we go to the polls is, and its ability to deliver those results and to give a broad-based kind of, and I would say accessibility into what are the returns on the promise that are being talked about here. It is a moment, again, we all know that the political moment is one that deals with a deep anxiety about what's going on to the south of us, what's going on around us in the world. And part of this budget is positioned as, again, it's the stronger Canada budget. Like it is about that. But that universality, that extension of where those benefits are going to be able to come from, and the ability for people to see the returns from this clearly in their communities is probably going to be one of the leading political questions and the leading things that judges this government as it goes forward on this. For a post-secondary piece, that's the ability for these investments to deliver in the key areas that are going to, and again, the skills, the infrastructure, the research talent, that these are things that are going to anchor prosperity in 3 or 4 years, and that there will be returns that are going to be able to be seen from them, and that there'll be returns from them wherever you are in the country, because those places that feel left out are going to feel, and those people who feel left out are going to feel deeply politically hurt at this moment that they weren't considered.
Michelle, final word.
Yeah. So I agree with Michael on this. I think follow through ultimately is everything. So a few things that I'll be watching for over the next little while, and not just the next year, but really the next, well, hopefully we'll see, 3 years or less. I guess it depends on where things go over the next couple of weeks. Look, so, are the new funds actually reaching campuses and students, right? And that one, it squarely goes back to the piece around infrastructure funding. Well, not just infrastructure funding, but a big part of that, right? So there's a huge opportunity again now for universities and colleges to really influence, T's and C's around that program, because they have not yet been defined. So I think that's, again, one that I really think we should all be watching for, because it is telling. Campus infrastructure is community infrastructure, and it impacts Canadians at a whole host of different levels. So that's something that I think we need to really, double down on in terms of watching, what those outcomes look like in real time. I'll be also watching for signs around stronger partnerships. I think this budget also leans very heavily on, it's not always just government's job, right? Like, what is the role of the private sector and industry? And then, of course, what is our role? So, does that come to life? Are we seeing more willingness and collaboration between higher education, universities, colleges, government, industry? Are we going to start to see new collaborations with, on internships, greater integration of will, these types of things? These will all be positive signals, if so, that, the investments that, we are seeing now and hope to see in the future will connect ideas to outcomes. And then, of course, that third piece comes back to, attracting talent, obviously critically important, but making sure that we have, immigration policy that is aligned with that to meet those objectives and goals, obviously will be important. And of course, we're waiting to get more details on that. The levels plan has been tabled, as we've discussed, but, the devil's always in the details. So these are all things that we're going to have to continue to follow and, adjust accordingly.
Thank you so much to all three of you for sharing your thoughts and for joining me so close after the release of the budget. I know we've had a minute to digest it, but maybe not quite enough minutes yet. And I know there's a lot of things that will still come out over the next few weeks that we all look forward to having answered.